Welcome back everyone to day 3, the final day of the IMU International Learning Resources Festival 2021. Before we start, there are a few things that I would like to say. First, please visit our iLRF website where you are most welcome to leave your thoughts or comments on the Padlet in our virtual lobby. Because this is our final day of the festival, it would be great if you could place your thoughts to make the world more vibrant. The link to our iLRF website and Padlet has been pasted in the chat panel. Second, we would also like to ask fellow participants that they use the iLRF virtual Zoom background, which is now pasted in the chat panel. Third, I would also like to recommend for you to use hashtag iLRF2021 if you are sharing any posts about this festival on social media. Fourth, today we have a special slot, which is a lucky draw. All those who have provided their feedback on any of the sessions that we had in the last 3 days are eligible. Therefore, all of you still have the chance to enter this lucky draw if you provide us your feedback on the last few sessions that we are going to have today. Lastly, I also would like to acknowledge all of our sponsors: Access Dunia Sdn Bhd, ED Connect, Elsevier Clinical Solutions, Electric Library Malaysia Sdn Bhd, Insan Scientific Sdn Bhd, and Book Channel Sdn Bhd, each of whom have very generously contributed into this event. Now, to begin with our agenda for today, the first item in the program is a plenary talk entitled Microlearning, Are You Doing It Right? For this session, our esteemed speaker is Dr. Robin Defelis, and Dr. Munir Goha Baba, Associate Dean IMU Oral Health, is the moderator. It is now my pleasure to invite Dr. Munir to begin the session.
Good morning and thank you so much. Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Munir Babar. I'm an e-learning enthusiast and a faculty member at International Medical University, your host institution for iLRF 2021. A study in the Journal of Applied Psychology found that microlearning was 17% more efficient in transferring knowledge than typical classroom teaching. Researchers found that information delivered in short focused chunk was easier to comprehend and recall than same learning delivered in a longer, more comprehensive format. Learners also tend to engage with microlearning more often, which increases learning retention. But the question is, are we doing it right? Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure for me to introduce Dr. Robin A. Defelis, who is going to talk to us about micro-learning. Are you doing it right? This is a topic which we should all be deeply interested, because it is by avoiding mistake that we can best ensure better student learning. Dr. Rubin has been strategist and consultant in the learning and performance arena for over 20 years. She is the co-author of Microlearning, Short and Sweet, and has been providing answer to how long does it take to develop learning for nearly 14 years. She specializes in enterprise learning management, focusing on maturing operations and talent. As a learning strategist, she concentrates on designing agile learning programs and evaluate plans measuring performance. Dr. Rubin, a diverse portfolio include major health and insurance system, pharmaceutical sale, financial institution, and manufacturing. She has also assisted startups, state universities, and government agencies. Dr. Rubin is a mentor and a career coach for learning and development teams and individuals, helping them understand their own challenges and capabilities for success. Dr. Rubin is also frequent presenter and self-proclaimed geek for industry data on how, what, and why of learning and development. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Rubin. Dr. Rubin, over to you.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I do appreciate it, and I like the information that you provided from the journal on psychology. That was very interesting, because current research on microlearning is still a little thin. So it's nice to know that folks are out there still looking for it and trying to understand how to maximize it. So I'm going to share my screen this morning and provide a presentation here on whether you're doing it right. So we're really looking at what I try to always share with folks is that microlearning and doing it right means something different to everybody. And so if we think about molding or taking bread dough and shaping it into what we want it to be as an end product, you very much will want to think about how to apply and leverage microlearning in the same sense, because the way you might do it for one educational context and environment may not be the same. And that's a readily accepted principle for many things that we do when we design learning for, for anyone. So I thought we would start off, even though I know there won't be a lot of engagement, but I'm going to set you up to look at 3 different items. And I want you to question whether or not in your mind, based off of your knowledge and experience with microlearning, and it could be very limited to very seasoned, but question, do you think the item I'm about to show you is a piece of microlearning or not? So the first one, though you cannot see it, it's an animated image, and it would play through and show you each of the types of blood and who can actually receive those blood types. So I want you to think for a moment if this animation was actually playing. I'm not sure why it's not, but would this be a piece of microlearning? Oh, there it goes. Now that it's working, I'm sorry, I did not realize I needed to click. So I'll give it a moment so you can see what it does. And it continues on to tell with each blood type which recipients can receive that blood type. So let's move to the next one. Here's a very simple image expressing to individuals. If you see a certain colored band on the wrist of the individual, this is the manner in which they would like you to interact with them. Is it microlearning or not? And the final one, this is a mobile app. The product is called Elevate, and it allows you to test your skills in basic segments that are very common for all of us: writing, speaking, math. And throughout this game, you can take little mini games, and you can see that here in the middle image, there are different types of activities that you can do inside writing, such as refine clarity of how you write or how to ensure proper punctuation. And these little activities take maybe 1 to 2 minutes. Is this microlearning? Okay, so you might have that, well, is it or isn't it? The answer is all 3 are types of microlearning. The first one is actually informing and educating in a very quick format, one solid objective. What blood type can a person have given their blood type? That's one objective with one outcome. And that information is being presented appropriately. The second one is a fantastic behavioral or performance change microlearning. And that was actually a poster at DevLearn 2021, which was a conference that just happened. And that was how they educated conference goers on the behaviors they wanted them to model at the conference. So that's pretty impressive, because microlearning, that was one visual image with a short soundbite that educated you instantly to perform a behavior. That's pretty amazing. And the final item that I'm still on this slide, it is absolutely, I see all these yeses over here. I apologize, I have the chat on another screen. So I see a bazillion yeses. This is amazing, yay. So perfect, everybody understands that these are all microlearning products, perfect. And the fun thing here is we saw 3 different ways in which microlearning can be created, delivered, and provided. So just to make sure that we're all on the same page, I want to make sure that I define microlearning based off of the way that I talk and present about it and design to it. This may differ from your understanding of microlearning as a definition or what you've decided microlearning has been defined for you and what you do. What microlearning really boils down to are a couple of key things. It's usually focused on a brief learning experience, which was expressed already by the descriptions that were being provided from that article from the Psychology Journal. And it achieves a focused outcome, one thing. So if we think back to the 3 examples I just showed, you can focus on writing and a specific item of writing, such as clarity or punctuation. With the poster at the conference, we focused on one objective, a behavior we wanted everybody to model. And with the first one objective. Help me understand if this person has A negative blood type, what bloods can a donor provide to them that would match? It integrates easily. Each one of those experiences expressed an easy integration. The first one was a simple visual that educated you very quickly through just short, brief frames of a movie. The second one was easily integrated as a visual signage at a conference all over the conference floor. And the third one is a mobile app that you can do anywhere. So if I was waiting to get on an airplane or go somewhere else, or I had a few moments in my day and I wanted a break, I could actually do this. And then accessible anywhere. Now this is being defined a little bit by the poster that we saw, but it was accessible anywhere in the context of the conference. So it actually does fit. It sometimes has the myth of microlearning must be mobile, and that's not necessarily true. So this is the criteria or base ingredients that begin to build the bread or the dough of microlearning. Now, if you're seeking a very technical definition, I have one of those too. And this definition comes from the book, Microlearning Short and Sweet, that I wrote with Dr. Carl Kopp. And here it is, a very technical item, which it simply states that microlearning is an instructional unit that provides a short engagement in an activity intentionally designed to elicit a specific outcome in the participant. And so we saw that experience in all 3 examples that we were given. In the photo that I've provided along with this definition, you could actually do a microlearning moment in an instructor-led perspective. You could actually do a small topic, one outcome, and you could do one daily and brief on any subject. We could take the blood type piece and just use that in an instructor-led format and talk that through, but also to engage the learners to understanding it as well. So there's all sorts of different ways and opportunities for microlearning. Notice that there's no timestamp on the definition that Dr. Kopp and I provide. And there's good reason for that. Not all objectives can be met in a finite amount of time. You might need 15 minutes to teach a certain concept, or as we just saw with some of the experiences that were given as examples, the poster is a quick read. Most people would absorb that information within a minute or two and begin demonstrating that behavior. They may actually take a photo of that poster so that they can reteach themselves repetitively how to make sure that they're performing that behavior. So that's different than maybe recalling and comprehending blood type. That might take you a little longer to process that information and make sure you have it down. I'm just checking over here to make sure there's nothing else in the chat. So why the bread? So I started talking about dough and pieces like that, how we create bread. I like to use cooking terms when I talk about anything in the learning field, really. I find it to be a universal language. Everybody eats and everybody understands typically something about food. And what happens with microlearning is we get focused on a piece of microlearning, or what I usually call a microlearning product. And then what happens is most individuals begin to think, well, I just need to create this one product and performance will change instantly. Now, some of the examples you've seen today, such as, again, the poster, might change your behavior, and that's a one and only microlearning product that you need. But most times What we're doing is we're taking a topic or a behavior or some other item, and we're breaking it down into digestible pieces. And that means we need to create a series or a campaign for those to actually get the benefit of everything we're trying to achieve. So when we talk about microlearning, we're standardly talking about one product. And I usually consider that to be a slice of bread, one slice. But if we were to say, put together 5 or 6 slices of bread so that we model behaviors, not only in the moment when we interact with a person, but how we maybe stand in the room or sit in the room at the conference, I might have other small snippets of information that demonstrate the behaviors that I want. So those are all also microlearning products. And those build together to create a microlearning campaign or one loaf of bread. So that's how I like to have folks think about it as I take them on the journey of discussing microlearning and help them see how they're applying microlearning concepts and help them to maybe think a little bit more about whether or not they're only ever focused on slices of bread, or are they trying to actually achieve a goal, and that goal would be a loaf of bread or a microlearning campaign. So what can a microlearning product be? So I know there's that, are you doing it right? But this is more about, why don't you give yourself a little validation about the things that you're doing? And maybe some of the items I share today will expand the opportunities in which you apply microlearning, giving you a whole new dimension to what you get to do. Some folks think microlearning products can only be specific types of items. And I'm here to say they can be many things. And you saw that again with the samples I presented. They can be infographics, e-learning, podcasts, blog series, email campaigns. They could be virtual instructor-led training. They can be many different things, but they don't have to be just something that focuses on being able to be used in a mobile app. They don't need to be the same thing every time you create it. You can create a variety of products and place them all into one campaign, which will probably incentivize and engage your learner to continue learning what you're trying to do. So instead of saying, what can it be? Ask yourself, well, what couldn't it be? Because for the most part, I think it could be everything. Now that we kind of have a sense of what a product can be, how do campaigns work? If this terming is new to you and you're thinking about that loaf of bread, what can a campaign be? A microlearning campaign can be a standalone where you design it to just be the only learning program there is, and it meets a programmatic goal. If you did a series-based campaign, let's say it was on the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion, you might be creating a series of different topics and creating campaigns that would address each one of those topics. You might have a whole campaign on diversity, you might have a whole campaign on equity topics, and one on inclusion. Or you could do ones that are about modeling behaviors, a campaign series that's helping to build behavior. You could do a campaign series that's all about just providing information and perspective. You could also create a campaign series that allows you to begin practicing and evaluating and analyzing yourself and your own philosophies and perspectives to see how you fit when it comes to different subjects on the matters of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So a series might build things up to a certain topic. I think about maybe medical students and their first year versus their second year, third year, and fourth year are all different. And you might build a series of microlearning campaigns that helps the student transition from a first year to second year. You could create a whole series of campaigns that's helping to transition and inform them of expectations that are coming to them to keep them prepared and ready to take on the next task in the next year. Or you could do what's called blended campaigns. And this is probably one of the most popular. You have a larger learning program in place. There's pieces of e-learning in there. There might be some virtual and instructor-led training, but you also support it maybe with a micro-learning campaign. So those are 3 different types of ways you can look at campaigns as an opportunity to augment what you're doing within your learning ecosystem. If the question is, what do you define as a learning ecosystem? I just term learning ecosystems is whatever you at your organization, whether it's an educational institution or if it's a corporate organization, it's the products that you create, the learning products. So at your organization, you might have a lot of online course development, and you may have a lot of e-learning and maybe some job aids or how-to guides. That might be all of the learning products that you have in your learning ecosystem. If you start to introduce microlearning in there, you're adding to your learning ecosystem. So these campaigns can work to do many different things for you in your learning ecosystem. Now, the next piece is about microlearning addressing performance. I'm very staunch on this. I do believe that when it comes to microlearning, you really are trying to change some type of performance. Performance isn't always behavior. Performance might be that you're helping them perform more successfully as a student, as a person in their first year of doing their clinicals. It could be in a company, it could be that you're helping the person perform better their task or job or duty, or it could be that your organization is trying to fold in a new cultural perspective. Maybe they're holding a different philosophy on how they want to run their business or how they want to bring in students and bring them through their time as a student in an organization, or even changing the culture of how faculty or instructors adopt using technology. Those are all different ways in which you might be changing performance, whether to just perform the job or to change an attitude or behavior or philosophy. So that is where microlearning really helps to move the needle with any performance goal you might have. On screen, what I have done is broken down a picture of what I believe is a hierarchical structure to how you use microlearning. And for this topic, what I did was I decided, well, it's going to be an onboarding for first-year clinical students, and we're using a blended learning campaign. So where does this all tie back to? Performance has measures. And if you're actually including microlearning, there's probably a story you want to tell from the data. And that's where the value and the drive comes in to do more and more microlearning, because you start to see how it can change performance. And if you have the data to back it, that is valuable. And if you want that data, more than likely that means you have some defined goals. In this example, there's an initiative goal. And the initiative is that the onboarding experiences, let's just say the onboarding experience is not satisfactory to the students. There's a lot of struggle, there's a lot of failures, maybe in their first semester. I'm not quite sure the accurate language, but as they're going through the first few months of their first year of clinicals, they might be struggling. And so an initiative was put into place to improve that experience for better success of the student as they go into their first year. And so that's an umbrella styled goal for an initiative. And then a learning program is developed. And within that learning program, there's a mentoring piece and then a microlearning campaign. So there's your blended learning right there. There's an opportunity to be mentored or coached, and that's going to come from a connection to another individual or a cohort of individuals or a group of individuals. And then the microlearning campaign piece might be just providing information in 1 or 2 objective formats with an outcome. This microlearning product helps you to start understanding the tools and resources that you have available to you as you move into doing the clinicals. Another microlearning product might be expectations of behaviors that you have on the job. performance behavior there, and then so on and so forth. And so you build out this campaign, one slice of bread at a time. And each slices of those breads have 1 to 2 objectives, just like we defined back a moment ago. And then there's an outcome. And that outcome helps you measure your goals. And so are they achieving those goals? And it's helping to inform the learning program goals. And then it's also helping to inform your initiative goals. So that's kind of a look at microlearning in the context of what its purpose is and what it's trying to do for you. Now there's other ways. So we talked about you can create all sorts of products, but what are other ways in which you can use microlearning? And there's this perspective was maybe more preparatory, and that leads us into use cases. So microlearning can be utilized in different situations that you might have, and I'd like to go over those with you. With microlearning, maybe you're doing something that's more pensive. Pensive is metacognition or reflection. So you might create a microlearning campaign to help deepen the analytical thinking of a student in their first year of clinicals. And you might create some opportunities for them to think about the perspectives of the patient, perspectives on how they analyze and diagnose the patient. It could be something like that. Troubleshooting, problem solving, critical thinking. That's usually what you're helping somebody to do. If we take it to a corporate perspective, it might be somebody that's a project manager, and it might be they're a junior project manager. How do you handle project management? How did you handle your first big project where you had to manage 10 people and get them to reflect on what they've done well, what they think they could improve? And then to an elicit an action, you might say, develop a plan to help you correct the things that you're discovering that you would like to improve for managing the next big project you have, or how you would handle a patient the next time you go into the room based off of some of the things that you were asked to think about in that microlearning product. So that's pensive. With performance, it's exactly what it is. It's supporting you in the moment. I don't remember how to utilize a piece of software to input information on a patient, or I don't recall how to handle a customer. And so in the moment, I might pull some information up, or artificial intelligence might push information to me saying, it's been a while since you've done this type of activity. Would you like to review this piece of information? And a microlearning product pops up and you can say yes or no to it. So there's all sorts of ways in which we can implement these use cases. With persuasive, we already saw some great examples of persuasive, especially that one simple image with the colored wristbands. That's helping you to modify a behavior. Post-instruction, let's think of the event we're in. You've just had 3 fantastic days, and there's still the rest of today for your presentations that you will enjoy. And so with post-instruction, what you can do is carry through some core topics and ideas, such as even microlearning. You could create more microlearning pieces to augment different topics that have been addressed in this conference. Or if you've had a onboarding, new hire training is very popular for this one, where you do a collective event with all of your new hires together, like a cohort. And then to help them transition and onboard into their jobs more quickly, you've created microlearning campaigns that address pieces that they don't really need to sit around and learn together. They can learn as they do their job. Practice-based is, again, very much like performance, but practice might be things like presentation skills, or helping to handle a difficult patient or difficult client or difficult customer. Those are all relatable circumstances, but those all take time and practice. Or if you were selling something, you might need to handle how you approach a sale, how to understand the person in front of you, what makes them more interested in what you're selling. And if they're deflecting your sales pitch, how do you handle their objections? You need to practice all of those. And so there's opportunities to do that. The Elevate app that I showed you is actually a practice-based tool. Preparatory, again, much like post-instruction was a learning event with something following it. Preparatory would prepare everybody to have an equal or common understanding before coming into an event. So the clinical students going into their first year, maybe the microlearning campaigns are not only preparatory to get them ready, but there's some that are happening when they do some post-instruction as well. So you can start to combine your use cases. So those are the 6 kinds of use cases. And as you just heard me say, you can mix and match them. You do not need to sit here and say, I must only make it practice-based. Part of practice might actually be including pensive or reflective prompts. So you get to have a fun time making combinations that really work to maximize helping the end participant get what they need. So now that we have an understanding of what microlearning is, and maybe that's helping you validate what you've been doing, we kind of understand what kind of products we can create, and maybe you saw opportunity for new ones for you to go try and do. And now we have some environmental or context of situations or use cases in which we get to put those microlearning products and campaigns into play. How about the tools, those authoring tools that we get to use to make those fun, engaging pieces? I want you to think about singularity and multiplicity. Some authoring tools will give us the opportunity to create multiple different types of e-learning or microlearning products, and some tools will only allow us to create one type of microlearning product. And what I've done is I've captured just a handful of the tools that are out there. There's many more tools than this, but here's some of the more common ones that I know of. And there's some of the ones that I've actually used to create microlearning. I'm sure there's many more that you have also been using and could contribute to this slide quite readily. So in the top left corner, Captivate, a very common tool capturing e-learning piece. Yes, e-learning products that are standard and been very common in the field can be used to create microlearning. You don't always need to go buy a new authoring tool to do the new thing that's out there trending in our field for learning. Articulate are the next 2. Articulate Rise gives you a quicker way to design and develop. And then there's the more traditional Articulate that you have as well. So those all kind of make for e-learning pieces. Canva helps you to create different presentations, but it also helps you to create really fun and engaging infographics, or very simplistic ones that pack a powerful message like the one that we saw at the beginning of the presentation. And Canva would be, so with Captivate and Articulate, we're realizing that's multiplicity sitting there. These ones on the bottom are much more about singularity. Canva is more directed towards infographics and maybe not much more. Interflection is actually a tool that allows you to think pensively and practice actual responses to circumstances that you will be placed in. It has an artificial intelligent agent in it that actually, as you record your video response back to the situation, it starts to read your video and analyze it for the criteria set in the product. And it will let you know based on a meter how closely you have hit the measures, like a grading or evaluative rubric, how much you've met the measures in responding to that situation in the ideal way that your organization desires you to function. So you could set this up for people to practice handling patients, or let's say you were in the hotel service area. How do you handle disgruntled people that are checking into the hotel? It allows you to practice all these different situations and garner feedback in the moment. But it's a singular design tool. That is the only thing you can do with it. Audacity, which is below it, is a free authoring tool, and you just record yourself. Well, what's that good for? Podcasts. So it's a very singular item. You would be recording yourself into a podcast. And then 7 Taps is a microlearning, and this one's very specific. Interflection and 7 Taps are 2 of the sole microlearning products I know out there. They tote themselves as microlearning development products and focus to that method. 7 Taps is a cloud-based software that allows you to author in only a card-based format. So it's a series of cards that you can click through, and it has different style cards that you can create, but it's also limited and it's only singular because that's all you can produce out of it is their one styled product, which is a card-based app. So those are different authoring tools. And as I put in parentheses some, because I know that you're all thinking about the many different tools that maybe you use to create microlearning products as well. Some of the things you might want to think about if these tools are maybe ones that you've not thought about using, think about these little considerations as you choose a tool, or think about the tools you already have in your toolkit. Think about accessibility. Just because we've moved to microlearning does not mean that we should not ensure that everybody can equally have access to what you're doing. Now, accessibility gets focused very much so on maybe those with visual impairments or if they're neurodivergent. But another aspect is mobile. Sometimes the audience we're trying to target might not have mobile access or even internet access. So ensuring equal access becomes very essential. You might need to create the same content into two different types of microlearning products to reach your entire audience, to ensure that it's accessible. There's also a learning curve. From the side of those that actually create microlearning, you should think about factoring the authoring tool philosophies you already have in place. If you're very much rooted in developing e-learning and traditional e-learning courses, it may be hard for you to break yourself of those habits and design in a way that actually embraces microlearning design principles. And so it's something we just have to teach ourselves how to do. Limitations. Every authoring tool has limitations, and the great learning designers that we figure out how to create amazing pieces of products by working around those limitations and learning how to maximize them. But sometimes those limitations might mean that they're not a good fit for you and your organization. 7TAPS is a cloud-based solution. And if you need to track things in an LMS, you might be a little averse to doing something in 7TAPS because you can't directly connect it. You can't make it SCORM compliant, those kind of things. So consider that as well. And the topic that we just talked about when I showed the different types of authoring tools, the singularity versus the multiplicity, it might be better for your budget. It might be more comfortable for your organization not to purchase things that only give you singular microlearning products. You may want something that gives you multiple ways in which to design and create microlearning products. You might not want 5 to 10 tools in your toolkit. You may want something that gives you multiplicity as opposed to singularity. So what are the challenges? That's where I would like to end so that we can get to our great discussion. So what happens when you have burnt toast? That's what I like to call the microlearning, because we have our bread, we do great things. And what I've realized in talking over the last several years about microlearning is there's a lot of challenges still out there because there's preconceived notions of what microlearning is. We started out with dough. Everybody's molded a definition of microlearning that they think is the right one. But is it the right one for you, or is it the right one for your organization? And does everybody have the same dough to start with? If your organization doesn't understand that this is the dough that you would like to make the bread from, you're going to have challenges because their bread might look very much different from yours. So what happens when we create microlearning? A lot of folks forget to make it goal focused. And so their campaigns or their products really have no end game, as they call it, no end game in mind. It's not really helping to move the needle or achieve something. So it's very important that they always start with a goal so that you can create those 1 to 2 objectives inside your microlearning product to help meet and reach that goal. Another challenge comes from implementation, and this comes from all sides. Implementation might be the implementation of doing microlearning. It might be challenging the learning and development team because they're not skilled in microlearning design. And so it's implementation at that level. It could be implementation at a technology level. You don't have the infrastructure because typically microlearning is asking you to collect data. And there are a lot of organizations out there that only collect data to show completion rates. not necessarily performance. And performance can take a whole different set of data that you might not be prepared to take on. And that might include other departments. So now you have to implement and incorporate maybe marketing or a data analysis or your IT department, and they might not be prepared to handle or manage what you need them to help you support for the organization. So implementation can be a big challenge if it's not discussed up front with the goals that you're trying to meet. Another challenge becomes that technology gets in the way of people actually introducing and incorporating microlearning, because the concept might be, well, it must be mobile friendly, and it can only be mobile. And it becomes so mobile focused that an organization considering it that doesn't have a mobile focused learning platform or learning initiative might think that they can't incorporate any microlearning at all. But if you've picked up from this presentation anything, you will realize there's many opportunities that are not mobile focused, but you can also do that. But it does create a challenge when the concept or perception is that microlearning must mean I am doing something mobile. And the final challenge that I've seen quite prevalent with organizations is, oh, microlearning needs micro timelines. That's not true. And there's this expectation that falsely gets put on those that have to develop the microlearning products and campaigns to do things with less time and less money because it's miniature. And the reality is we just talked about three things, from being goal focused to the multifaceted challenges of implementation. You actually need more time upfront for planning, implementation, and evaluation, creating that framework to fit your microlearning products in. And sometimes it actually takes more time. And if you're an organization that's just beginning to introduce microlearning into your learning ecosystem, you can't truncate the timelines. You actually have to give those folks more time to discover the challenges and the opportunities that they will be having by actually incorporating microlearning. So that's where I would like to end. I will make sure to provide a copy of these slides over for those to be shared. What I did on this last slide, I won't stay here too long, but I wanted you to know that I have a variety of topics on all of the things I just presented on. And depending on where you're at with microlearning and incorporating it, there's an article here for you. So if you're having challenges and having microlearning adopted by your organization, there's something here for you. If you're being challenged by, should I create an informal learning path to microlearning or a formal learning path, I have an article there for you. So there's tons of articles here that can help to expand the topics that I addressed at the surface in this presentation today. And I just want to thank you for your time. And I want to open up the floor to any of your questions and have some discourse today. But I wanted to thank you as well for allowing me to help you question how you think you're doing with your applications of microlearning, and if I've sparked any new ideas for you. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. A lot of information and brilliant information, and definitely it will help us improve in so many ways. So now the floor is open for question. So there is one comment from Associate Professor Dr. Nilesh Kumar Mitra. For IMU, the challenge is that microlearning product should be 100% compliant to Moodle as our learning management system. As all the teaching and learning go on via Moodle, what are your piece of advice? Thanks so much.
I guess my question is, what does compliant mean to Moodle? Is there a set of rules that everybody must design by in Moodle? So it's limiting that ability to make it maybe engaging in the ways that you envision. That, I think that's the challenge in this question. I'm not quite clear on that compliance.
Yes, Dr. Nilesh, can you clarify a little bit? I think it's most likely it should be, whatever we do should be adapted to Moodle, because it's our learning management system. So it is more toward that. Dr. Lay said the availability to students via Moodle.
Okay, so
Yeah.
no matter what, it's a limitation of implementation. So,
Yes.
okay, I don't think that that's a disadvantage. So the very first design principle that I teach to is tool capacity and to learn the limitations. A limitation of Moodle is that's the central access point, but that's all it really is. For example, I'm prototyping with another individual and their learning management systems. They have two of them. So we're trying to test it out in two different learning management platforms. But we have Moodle and we have Canvas. And Moodle has some rigidity to it, but we realize we can take and create like a little lesson, and that lesson would link to the cloud-based solution 7TAPS. So it's taking the student outside of, and now I don't know if that's allowed with Moodle here in this context, but we are trying to find ways where we are taking the opportunity to not make them sit inside Moodle all the time, but it is a launch pad to other things. Sometimes it's a downloadable, like an infographic that they can print out and put in their study area. So we're just trying to envision Moodle as a delivery mechanism that allows you to either grab information and pull it down and take it with you where you need it, or you can place something directly in there, like an e-learning piece created in Captivate or Storyline. And then third, a launching pad to jump them to something that's more cloud-based. I don't know if that addresses the question or gives you or sparks some ideas for you about different ways to just see Moodle as the delivery piece and creating multiple pathways to allow the student to go outside of Moodle.
Yeah, thank you. It's just like having a base camp to reach the summit.
Yes, yes, that's exactly it. I love it. I love it. Yes, exactly.
So let's have some more questions from audience. Mr. Hasnan, Zafar Baloch is asking that I would thank you for a great session. I would like to ask how we could nicely connect microlearning episodes seamlessly.
So your whole loaf of bread looks the same and it's not different types of slices of bread, right? Or flavors of cereal accidentally getting mixed together. Storytelling is always going to be critical because you have such little time in a microlearning piece to engage the student. And last evening, when I was teaching my cohort about design principles, one of the things that was lacking was they were telling you the information, but they weren't saying it in the context of the experience. So if it was a new hire, what's the day in the life of a new hire? Can you create characters or people or a theme that can move through those episodes? And so you get the story of a person and you can identify with it, or it helps a person to, again, just like today's conversation we've been having, it's helping you see what you're doing and say, hey, I'm actually doing some things really well and I'm happy for that. Wow, I didn't know I could do that, and it's giving me more opportunity. So I think that with microlearning, we always have this opportunity to provide the story that draws them in and gives them context. The challenge in that is that if you don't design, and this is why I say sometimes microlearning is a challenge for those that are used to doing traditional e-learning design, that the story you have to create has to be very global. Another design principle I teach to is global equity. So the story can't truncate or bifurcate your audience or fragment your audience. You have to make sure at all times the way you write is concise, but it still reflects the whole audience. Because if you write in a certain way, they might say, well, that doesn't include me. And then they get a little lost, or why are they talking about this? It doesn't have anything to do with me. It's not relevant. Maybe I shouldn't be looking at this. So stories have to make sure that they can involve everybody, or at least make everybody feel identified by what you're saying.
Thank you. I think that I've answered Mr. Hasnan's question. Another interesting question is that necessary to do assessment right after we deliver the micro-learning to capture whether outcome has met by the student. This is from Zabiba Ibrahim.
I love this question because it comes up so often. And what I tell folks, especially again, if there's been a strong e-learning focus in their own experiences of what they've been doing, because it's a challenge for everyone. Most times when we create learning moments and then say, hey, did this happen? It's usually right in the moment of the learning that's being presented to them. An assessment check, a knowledge check, an assignment afterwards. But typically with microlearning, we're looking for something happening over time. So I try to have people think about, is it really about a one-time experience with a one-time result, or is this a multiple time experience with a result that builds over time along with it? So we think about bread, and sometimes when we make bread, we make it with a yeast and we need it to proof. And so we set it aside and it rises over time. And we can think about that being a student taking multiple microlearning products, building that story, and their information and behavior, it starts to rise up. And then we form it into what we need. So right afterwards, there might be opportunity for you to gather information that might be relevant. But if it's also not being assessed or checked after the fact down the road, I'm not sure how familiar everybody is with Kirkpatrick's 4 levels of evaluation, but as we get towards the end of those 4 levels, it's about behavioral change, performance change, and then there's this ultimate piece, which is return on investment. Return on investment might be more students graduating and getting through a program. They're more skilled and able to perform to get hired more quickly. That would be that return on investment. But they would have to be modeling the behaviors you're seeking for that return on investment to happen. And typically we all understand that behaviors only change over time with experience. So to answer, I think it's a long-winded answer to say, go ahead and collect information in the moment if you think it's valuable or helps to create a baseline, but that baseline needs to be measured over time to show the growth that you're seeking.
Thank you so much. With this, we come to the end of the session. And thank you for a very enlightening talk about microlearning. And I'm sure all of the audience would benefit from this. Thank you, Dr. Rubin. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated this. This was just a great experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Robin DeFelice, for a most interesting talk. And thank you, Dr. Munir, for moderating this session.